Hello, I'm Philip Stoten. I'm at Electronica 2012, and I'm joined, as I have been for the last couple of days, by Eric Miscoll. Eric, thanks very much for joining me. It's been a lot of fun. I wanted to start by talking about some of the presentations you've been doing. The first presentation you did this week was on the topic of the changing environment in the contract manufacturing world. We've all seen and heard examples of that this week, but what are you seeing in terms of the big picture globally?
Yeah, that presentation covered a variety of issues. Just to highlight a few, where to begin? There's one of the big issues, obviously, has been the increasing costs, underlying costs in the industry. A lot of that is driven by labor rates in China. Everybody went to China, and I think that is kind of, as those have increased, OEMs have been forced to reconsider and rethink, really, the solutions they put in place, which in often cases have not been very effective for them.
Okay.
What I was telling the audience was that sometimes cheap can be very expensive. Specifically, going to China, in all of our data sets, the main point that correlates with increased risk to companies and the supply chain is the number of time zones you put between where the order is placed and where the order is fulfilled.
Okay.
More time zones, more risk, ultimately more cost. So, and I think as people are doing total cost of outsourcing analyses, they're starting to look at those pieces. And that in turn drives this whole return to regionalisation that we're experiencing.
And this thing that we call reshoring or whatever. Before we go on to that, you think initially the whole drive to Asia, I mean, it felt a bit like a rush of lemmings towards a cliff edge. Yeah. But someone drove that to begin with. It felt like Wall Street, the markets were driving it to an extent, but people kind of went willingly, didn't they?
Yeah, there is a lot of lemming-like behavior in this industry, and I think so. To answer your question directly, yeah, a lot of blame can be shared by Wall Street. It was the wrong thing. It was this focus on quarter. It was a very poor understanding of the dynamics, not understanding manufacturing, not understanding supply chains, but understanding bottom line and that laser-like focus on that. And it was interesting because part of what happened at that time, I don't know if you remember, the U.S. had outsourced to Mexico. Mexico is a great solution, is a great solution for the U.S. market. Well, this whispering campaign started about quality problems, that Mexico is full of quality problems, has all these quality problems. There's as many quality problems there as there's in any other factory anywhere else in the world, right? You have the same issues. There's nothing unique to it, and it really was a whispering campaign. I think, not to be conspiracy theory here, but I think that helped make it easier to move to China, saying, well, we got these qualities here, listen, we can go to China and we get it. And there was this great desire to penetrate the market there in China. I don't know how successful that has been, but yeah.
So China builds this huge factory for the world, as they like to call it, this huge manufacturing facility, and then internationally we start to realize that actually everything happening there and shipping this big product back doesn't necessarily work. The distance in the supply chain is causing some stresses and strains, and we say, okay, well, that's not quite right. Hopefully we learn some lessons. What do we do about it, and what are we doing about it now as an industry? So
that's that return to regionalization, onshoring, repatriation. It goes by many terms, which is the sensible solution. It's back to the beginning, right? So build in region for region. Every major region of the world has a high cost, low cost part. Europe, Western Europe has Eastern Europe. North America, we had in the United States and Canada, we had Mexico and some others. Asia, China, but even within China, within Asia, China isn't the lowest cost anymore. Vietnam and India are, right? Now, I'm not advocating moving everything there. No. If you're only wanting the lowest cost labor in the world, then we should all move to sub-Saharan Africa because it's the cheapest labor on the planet. I'm not advocating that for anybody.
No.
But if that's all the interest is, and so fortunately, and part of the discussion this week on the panels and in the interactions here, has been this increased sophistication and maturity, really, within the OEMs and the understanding of these issues, and not just focusing just on that labor cost, but saying, listen, there's a whole cost. And part of that, quite frankly, in our analysis is the cost internal to the OEM, which is quite significant and really underestimated by many OEMs as to what their cost is in support of managing and acquiring that. You want to focus on cost reductions, put a little focus there.
And cost of ownership or cost to serve or whatever mixture of those terms you want to use. So they sold us this dream of manufacturing Asia. It would be cheaper, it would be fine. Not the case. They also sold us a couple of different models. They sold us the EMS model, they sold us the ODM model where the intellectual property moves in different places. How are people seeing that mix now? Are they still, is the ODMs always seem to make a little bit more money? Are they still doing that? Are they still enjoying some success?
So, two comments. The first one on, to be very clear, so this is not about in any way, denigrating China's solution. China is a great solution, has great factories for certain types of manufacturing, right?
Absolutely, no doubt.
And a lot of it belongs there. Cell phones probably belong there, right? Game stations probably belong there. Heavy industrial equipment probably doesn't belong there, right?
Unless it's being used there.
Unless it's being used there, exactly. So again, in region makes sense, but not having everything, these big bulky things made there and shipped elsewhere. To your question on the solution, EMS ODM. ODM historically, which is primarily a Taiwanese-based activity, where they design and manufacture a ready off-the-shelf product, was a great solution, was an easy transaction. But what happened was OEMs had an expectation that the service level would be higher. So and ODMs traditionally had a much higher profit margin than EMS. If you look at that over the last 5, 6 years, you see it just plummeting. And that's a direct result of the OEM service requirements. So what's happened is ODMs have just are moving away from the OEM community, and they're saying, we don't want your business, we can't make money on it. This is unacceptable. And they've done this in very overt ways. And I'm not, again, this is happening, has been happening for the past year, not just with the big OEMs, but with mid-market ones as well, where all of a sudden they're finding their solutions, where they're saying, I want this and that, I want to change this, and they're just saying no. And these Western OEMs aren't used to hearing no from their suppliers like that. What I'm telling the EMS community is, within there should be opportunity for you. How can you position yourself to identify and get some of the business like that? Flextronics, frankly, was very successful getting some HP business that the ODMs walked away from last year, and Flex jumped in and was able to pick it up. So.
And be careful when you do pick it up that you don't become an ODM.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that can damage your EMS business. So what we've got is a whole bunch of dynamics at play. We went to Asia, we realized it wasn't the right thing. During that period, the costs in China rose as well, so there's a bit more of an evening out there. We see some reshoring in terms of manufacturing, particularly when it's large form factor. If I'm an EMS and I'm sat in the audience listening to this and it's all making perfect sense to me, the question I want to ask you at the end of that is, well what do I do next? How do I leverage that? How do I prepare for that new or the landscape as it lies now?
No, and that's the $10,000 question. And the answer, what we see in the industry is really...
Is $10,000?
Well,
that's a good deal.
I'm giving you a deal here. I'm giving you the China price. It falls into two categories. One is a service-based one. And in that service space, you see a lot of EMS who have tried to expand in other services. Design services being one on the front end, and on the back end, kind of aftermarket services. But as I indicated in both of my presentations, if you look at it over the last 10 years, as a overall percent of the EMS revenue, it's moved the needle very slightly. It's, I think, 3 percentage points. It went from 4 to 7% of overall revenue for the EMS industry, which is interesting. So what is that telling us? The market, even though there's dedicated effort to do that, really isn't buying into it, because they're probably not really, OEMs are conditioned to low cost, so why are they all of a sudden, why are you going to come to me and say you're cheap here but I'm expensive here? They're going to say, no, you're cheap.
You're cheap, that's your job.
So what is really happening, what we're kind of pushing our EMS clients more towards, is more of kind of a product type of a solution. What we're seeing there is, in some cases, you see EMSs acquiring component type businesses.
Right.
And there's several examples of that in the industry, and I think we'll see more of that. You know, buy something, right, and have something that it has higher margin. The other one is find other services. Go into your customers, look around. what else are they doing in that factory besides, primarily what EMS does is PCBA? What else are they doing? There are great examples in the industry where they go in and in some cases develop like a repair service for a product, because by walking around looking outside of the PCBA lens, you see that your OEM is still struggling doing this, and it's a real nuisance to them. There's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So really kind of look within that for more types of things.
Okay.
In some cases, some are buying outright OEMs. There's the example of the one in the UK that we discussed the other day that's doing that. Went out, small EMS in the UK, bought a small OEM. What are they doing? They're trying to get higher margin work.
Yeah,
So,
makes sense.
So there's lots of opportunity in the market.
Okay, well, thanks very much for chatting to me about that, Eric, and we'll speak again. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.